In the heart of Geneva, there is a building where the world's most famous product is made. It generates an estimated $13 billion in annual revenue. It controls 30% of the global luxury watch market, and yet, legally speaking, it does not exist for the purpose of making money. If you look for a list of Rolex shareholders, you will find nothing. If you look for a public earnings report, you will find silence. If you look for their tax returns, you will find a void. Rolex is not a company in the way we understand it. It is a society anonym owned 100% by a private charitable foundation. This is the gilded truth. Rolex has spent a century perfecting the art of the perpetual, not just in its watch movements, but in its ability to generate massive wealth while remaining legally and fiscally invisible. To understand the scheme, we have to go back to when Rolex was an English brand. Hans Wilsdorf, a Bavarian orphan with a genius for marketing, founded the company in London in 1905. For 10 years, London was the center of his universe. But in 1915, World War I changed the math of luxury forever. The British government, desperate for war funds, introduced the McKenna duties. The tax was a 33.3% customs duty on all imported luxuries, including the Swiss movements Wilsdorf relied on. Overnight, his production costs skyrocketed. He wasn't just losing his margins, he was losing his competitive edge. To Wilsdorf, taxation wasn't just a cost of doing business, it was an existential threat. He didn't just want to avoid the tax, he wanted to live in a world where it couldn't reach him. In 1919, Wilsdorf fled. He moved the entire operation to Geneva, Switzerland. But this wasn't just a change of scenery. Wilsdorf chose Switzerland for its society anonym SE status. In the Swiss legal code, an SE is an anonymous joint stock company. It allowed him to keep the names of his investors and the size of his profits entirely confidential. He was building a black box. But the ultimate layer of protection wouldn't come until 1944. Hans Wilsdorf had no children, no heirs. When his wife, Florence, passed away in 1944, he realized that without a plan, his empire would eventually be sold, taxed, or dismantled by the state. His solution was the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. He didn't just leave his money to a foundation. He transferred the entire ownership of Rolex into a private trust that, under Swiss law, is recognized as a charitable entity. Here is where the myth and the scheme collide. By law, Rolex SE is a for-profit watchmaker. It makes billions. But because it is owned by a non-profit foundation, it doesn't pay dividends to shareholders. It pays donations to its owner. In the eyes of the Swiss taxman, the profit of the world's most successful luxury brand is merely a charitable contribution in transit. But if Rolex is a charity, why is it so hard to find out where the money goes? And how did this non-profit status become the ultimate weapon in a war against the world's biggest billionaires? Coming up next, the foundation trap, how Rolex became the only company LVMH can't buy. To understand the Rolex tax strategy, you have to understand the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. Under Swiss law, specifically Article 80 of the Swiss Civil Code, a foundation is a legal entity that exists to serve a specific purpose, not to generate profit for owners. But here is the gilded genius. The foundation doesn't make watches. It owns Rolex SE, which does. Rolex SE operates like any other cutthroat corporation. It manufactures, it markets, and it sells. At the end of the year, after paying its thousands of employees and its billion-dollar marketing budget, it has a massive surplus. In a normal company, like Apple or LVMH, that surplus is profit. It's taxed by the state, and then paid to shareholders as dividends. But Rolex has no shareholders. Instead, the profit is funneled upward to the foundation as a donation. In Switzerland, charitable foundations are largely exempt from corporate and capital taxes. The money stays within the walls of the castle, tax-free, ready to be reinvested into the next generation of dominance. For nearly a century, Rolex was actually two separate companies. Rolex SE in Geneva handled the marketing and assembly. But the heart of the watch, the movements, was made by Igler SE in Bern. They were separate entities with separate books. This was Wilsdorf's ultimate secrecy shield. If a regulator looked at one company, they only saw half the story. In 2004, Rolex finally bought the Bern factory for an estimated $1 billion. Why now? Because the foundation needed total vertical integration to ensure that not a single cent of margin escaped to an outside supplier. By owning every screw, every gear, and every hairspring, the foundation ensured that every penny of the watch's 500% markup remained under the tax-exempt umbrella. In the luxury world, Bernard Arnault is known as the wolf in Kashmir. He has swallowed Tiffany and Cole, Dior, and Bulgari. But when he looks at Rolex, the wolf loses his teeth. Because of the foundation structure, Rolex is legally unbuyable. Under the terms of the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, the company cannot be sold. It has no shares to trade on the stock market. There is no board of investors to bribe. There is no family drama to exploit for a hostile takeover. Rolex is a closed loop. It exists in a state of perpetual stability. While rivals must chase quarterly profits to keep their stock price up, Rolex can think in decades. They don't have to report to anyone except a hand-picked board of Swiss trustees who meet in secret. This isn't just a business model. It's a fortress that keeps the global financial markets at the gates. But wait, if it's a charitable foundation, where does the money go? Switzerland requires foundations to spend their money on their stated purpose. For Rolex, that's education, culture, and social welfare. Rolex builds social housing in Geneva. They fund prestigious awards for scientists. They sponsor the Oscars, but look closer. These donations, estimated at around $100 million annually, represent a tiny fraction of their $13 billion revenue. Where is the rest of the money? It's sitting in a reinvestment fund. It's buying the world's most expensive real estate on the Rue du Neni. It's building a war chest so large that Rolex doesn't just dominate the watch industry. They own the land it sits on. Coming up next, the supply crisis. How Rolex uses artificial scarcity to keep the tax-free machine running. If you walk into a Rolex boutique today with $10,000 in cash, you will likely leave with nothing but a brochure. The display cases are empty. The waitlists are years long. To the casual observer, it looks like a supply chain failure. To the sophisticated insider, it is a masterclass in price control. Rolex produces an estimated 1.2 million watches a year. That is not rare. It is industrial-scale manufacturing. But by tightly controlling the flow of those watches to their authorized dealers, Rolex ensures that demand always exceeds supply by a factor of 10. Why? Because in a tax-exempt foundation, you don't need to maximize volume to satisfy shareholders. You need to maximize brand equity. An empty shelf is the most powerful advertisement in the world. It tells the consumer, this is not a product. This is a privilege. This scarcity creates a grey market, a secondary world of resellers and flippers. Rolex publicly claims to hate the grey market. They strip dealers of their licenses if they're caught selling to flippers. But the gilded truth is that the grey market is Rolex's greatest ally. When a watch doubles in value the moment it leaves the store, it ceases to be a timepiece. It becomes a currency. By allowing this gap to exist, Rolex ensures that their product is inflation-proof. It gives the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation a level of economic sovereignty that no other brand possesses. They have created a global, decentralized bank where the notes are made of 900 liters steel and 18-karat gold. In 2022, Rolex made a move that sent shockwaves through the industry. They launched the Certified POA program. For decades, Rolex only made money on the initial sale. The billions of dollars traded on the secondary market went to third-party dealers. But with the CPO program, Rolex has officially entered the flip. Now, they buy back their own watches, authenticate them, and sell them for more than the original retail price. It is a perfect, closed-loop system. They control the supply of new watches to keep prices high. They control the certification of old watches to capture the secondary profit. And every single cent of this recycled wealth flows back into the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, untouched by the taxman. The perpetual movement isn't just inside the watch, it's the money itself. Coming up next, the end of the myth. What happens if the foundation ever cracks? For nearly a century, the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation has operated in a legal sanctuary. But the world is changing. Global tax authorities are no longer satisfied with charitable labels that hide billions in liquid assets. In recent years, the G7 and the EU have pushed for a global minimum tax. They are looking for tax havens not just in Caribbean islands, but in the heart of Europe. Switzerland has been forced to dismantle much of its legendary banking secrecy. The question now is, how much longer can a multi-billion-dollar luxury conglomerate hide behind a 1944 trust document? If the Swiss government is forced to redefine what constitutes a charitable foundation, The Rolex fortress could face a multi-billion-dollar tax bill that would shake the industry to its core. But here is the gilded truth about Rolex's greatest strength. It is also its greatest trap. Because Rolex cannot be sold, it can never truly pivot. It is a prisoner of its own heritage. While Apple can invent the Vision Pro and LVMH and move into luxury hotels, Rolex must make the same 5 or 6 watches over and over forever. They have optimized for the perpetual, but in a world of digital disruption and synthetic diamonds, perpetual can quickly become obsolete. The foundation structure ensures they survive today, but it prevents them from owning tomorrow. They have built the perfect machine, but they have forgotten that every machine, no matter how well oiled, eventually runs out of time. So, is it a tax scheme? Yes. Is it a marketing miracle? Absolutely. Rolex is the ultimate expression of the gilded truth. They realize that in a world of fluctuating currencies and crumbling empires, people will pay any price for something that stays the same. They didn't just build a watch. They built a financial religion. A church where the donations are tax-exempt, the saints wear Daytonas, and the god is a dead Bavarian man who realized that the best way to keep your money is to give it to yourself in the name of charity. In the end, time is the only thing we can't buy. But for the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, time is the only thing they never have to pay for.